pounds, but I'm using Slim Fast and Young Men.
Which one works?
The young men are kicking it, baby.
Aretha, I'm told that her first trip to Muscle Shoals didn't go well, right?
And so I went over there and got into a fist fight with her husband. I was told by Wexler that he would never darken my doors again. He would never come back to Muscle Shoals.
If you're a big fan of Aretha Franklin, you will never look at her the same way again after this. Why, you may ask? Well, Aretha's life, especially her love life, was full of drama.
And he started demanding that Jerry Wexler fire the horn player, and then fire the trumpet player, and then this other guy. I said, what are these people doing, you know, to intimidate you? And he said, well, they're making passes at my wife.
There were rumors that she was involved with married men, and that she tried to keep up a perfect image, even getting upset when stories about her didn't match how she wanted to be seen.
And I sat down in the door sill, and that's really the first time it really dawned on me that my wife was Aretha Franklin.
Then there were her many relationships and marriages. Some were abusive, others just messy. With all that going on, it's no surprise that her career was affected too. Let's take a closer look. Aretha Franklin was not only known as the Queen of Soul, but she was also the Queen of Strength. She became an icon not just because of her powerful voice, but also because of her ability to endure pain and hardship, all while staying strong. Aretha secretly battled pancreatic cancer for nearly 10 years, and even though her health was declining, she refused to let it overshadow her incredible career.
Cancer. Doctors say it is one of the most aggressive forms of cancer and can kill years, maybe even months after a diagnosis. Franklin had the neuroendocrine type, a rarer form of the disease.
She held on to her title as the Queen of Soul for over 50 years. During her career, she sold over 75 million albums, won 18 Grammy Awards, and made history as the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 1994, she became the youngest artist to receive the Kennedy Honor, an honor that showed how respected she was by the world.
These are her own words. She said, "It is with my sincerest regrets I am unable to be with you tonight as planned. I am highly honored to be held in such high esteem, along with my peers and with my old friends."
Throughout her life, Aretha faced many challenges, not just in her career, but also in her personal life. She worked hard to keep her personal struggles out of the spotlight. One of the most private parts of her life was her relationships, and there were rumors about her possibly being involved with married men. However, there was never clear proof of these claims. Aretha was very protective of her private life, and anyone who tried to bring attention to her personal issues made her angry. Her biographer, David Ritz, once said that Aretha wanted people to see her as having a happy family and a perfect home, and she was upset when people said otherwise. Her nephew, Tim Franklin, also said that his aunt had lived a difficult life, but she never let it show to the public. At the age of 19, Aretha married Ted White. They had a son together named Teddy White Jr., but their marriage wasn't a happy one. Ted and Aretha divorced in 1969 after reports of domestic violence. There were even articles written about how Ted was physically abusive toward Aretha. In one article from 1968, Time magazine described how Ted had roughed her up more than once. Unfortunately, Ted wasn't just Aretha's husband. He was also her manager. His controlling behavior and violence made Aretha's life very difficult. The music industry and the people around her could see the bruises on Aretha, and they knew about the violence, but no one did anything to help her. Aretha endured years of suffering because of Ted, and no one stepped in to stop it. But why didn't anyone step in to help Aretha? Why did she keep staying in this toxic and dangerous relationship? Even though people in the music world saw what was happening, no one tried to intervene. For a long time, Aretha stayed with Ted, and it seemed like no one cared about what she was going through.
And he started demanding that Jerry Wexler fire the horn player, and then fire the trumpet player, and then this other guy. So I said, what are these people doing, to intimidate you? And he said, well, they're making passes at my wife.
It took a long time for Aretha to find the strength to leave him, but eventually, she did. Aretha wasn't just singing about the struggles women face. She was living through those struggles herself. One of the most difficult times in her marriage happened when she was at a recording session in Alabama. Ted, who was known for his violent temper, thought that one of the musicians at the session was flirting with Aretha. He became furious, and it led to a violent outburst. Instruments were thrown around, and a fight broke out. Everyone in the room could see how much damage Ted had caused. Aretha was left standing in the middle of the chaos, once again a victim of Ted's anger.
And so I went over there and got into a fist fight with her husband. I was told by Wexler that he would never darken my doors again. He would never come back to most of the shows.
There were many other times like this. In 1967, Aretha was scheduled to perform at the Hyatt Regency in Atlanta. But just days before her performance, she and Ted were banned from the hotel because of yet another violent argument. Hotel staff had seen the bruises on Aretha and witnessed the shouting and fighting. Despite all of this, Aretha still performed. She sneaked in and sang for 2 hours, using her music as a way to express the pain she couldn't say out loud. The audience had no idea that she was hurting so much behind the scenes. Musicians, record executives, and journalists all saw the bruises and the emotional toll it took on Aretha, but they chose to look the other way. In fact, even in the 2021 biopic Respect, the abuse was barely addressed. Actor Marlon Wayans, who played Ted White, admitted that they didn't want to portray Ted as a monster.
I think that, he was there for her at a time when, she needed to be rescued from underneath the thumb of her father. And, he was had a very strong personality, and Ted did too.
But how else could anyone describe a man who beat his wife in front of an audience?
There wasn't much written about Ted. So I had to kind of really think about the psychosis and think about what kind of person he is. And I realized that, like, when he talks about his demons, it's like damaged people.
Even after the divorce, Ted continued to interfere in her career. He still had business ties with Aretha, and he would threaten anyone who tried to help her move on from him. Even though Aretha had left him physically, the emotional scars stayed with her for a long time. It was clear that her songs came from a place of deep pain, but no one asked if she was okay. She was a famous and valuable artist, and because of this, many people chose to ignore the truth of what was happening to her. Instead of helping her, they looked away. Ted White was not the first man to control Aretha's life. From the start of her career, Aretha was surrounded by men who used their power to take advantage of her. Ted just happened to be the one who did it the most publicly and violently. But Aretha never let the pain stop her from pursuing her passion for music. She had the strength to keep going, even when it seemed impossible. By 1968, after years of suffering, Aretha finally gathered the courage to leave Ted. Her marriage was over, but the damage Ted had caused couldn't be undone easily. She poured all her pain into her music, and her song, "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," became a symbol of her strength. It wasn't just another hit, it was a declaration of her independence. Aretha was free, and for the first time in years, she was able to live without the constant fear of Ted. Aretha Franklin's life wasn't just about her struggles with Ted White. it was also about how she found the strength to keep going, no matter how hard life got. Aretha faced many difficult situations, including violence and abuse. Aretha showed the world that no matter how difficult life became, she could still keep moving forward. Aretha found love again with Glynn Turman. They met backstage at a show in Los Angeles. Glynn was introduced to Aretha by one of her sons, who excitedly said, "Glynn Turman, my mother loves you." Glynn, surprised, asked, "Who's your mother?" When the boy told him it was Aretha, Glynn was shocked. This was the start of their relationship. They became engaged in 1978, and they were married not long after.
He says, "Glynn Turman." I said, "Hi." He says, "My mother loves you." I said, "Who's your mother?" He says, "Aretha Franklin." I said, "Whoa."
Aretha had missed out on a big wedding when she married Ted White, so she decided to have a beautiful wedding with Glynn. She wanted this to be the perfect celebration of love. Aretha loved throwing parties, and this wedding was going to be the biggest one yet. She made sure that her second wedding was something she would remember forever. At that time, she had 4 children, and Glynn had 3 children from previous relationships.
Because I came with 3 children. She treated them with grace, and I couldn't help but love her even more for that.
In 1979, Aretha's father was shot and fell into a coma. He stayed in a coma until he passed away in 1984. During these tough years, Aretha focused on rebuilding her career. She worked hard to get her music back on top, but it was a challenging time for her. Glynn found it difficult to deal with the pressures of being married to such a famous woman. He felt like he wasn't as important as Aretha, and this caused problems in their relationship.
And I stopped, and I sat down in the door sill, and that's really the first time it really dawned on me that my wife was Aretha Franklin.
Even though Aretha and Glynn tried to show the world that their marriage was perfect, things started to fall apart. The media portrayed their marriage as a fairy tale, with a famous actor marrying a famous singer. However, behind the scenes, things were not so perfect. After their fairy tale wedding, the relationship became difficult. In 1982, Aretha and Glynn separated. They struggled to keep their relationship strong while being apart. They eventually divorced in 1984, but they stayed friends until Aretha passed away in 2017. In her final days, Glynn Turman went to visit Aretha Franklin at her bedside. He was there to say goodbye to his good friend, who was known as the Queen of Soul. Aretha had been battling illness for some time, but her spirit and energy were still strong. When Glynn walked into the room, the people around her told Aretha that Glynn was there. She heard this and showed a little sign of life. Her eyes opened, and she perked up. They were able to make contact, which was a very special moment for both of them.
They kind of shook her when I entered the room and said, "Aretha, Glynn is here." She perked up a bit there and opened her eyes, and we were able to make contact.
Glynn remembered Aretha not only as a great singer, but also as a wonderful wife and mother. He spoke about how funny she was and how she always had a good sense of humor. She loved telling jokes, and she had a lot of them. Glynn said she would try out new jokes on him, and it would always make people laugh.
You know, she was always cracking jokes, you know. She had a repertoire. She had a repertoire of jokes that she would, try out on you.
Aretha had a special way of making people feel happy, even when things weren't funny at first. She could turn any situation into something light and funny, just by the way she saw things.
She could make a situation funny that you wouldn't think was necessarily funny when you first started with the situation, but her take on it would crack you up.
Aretha was not only funny, but she was also a curious person. She loved learning new things and trying new experiences. Even though she was one of the most famous women in the world, she was always interested in things that others might not expect. She didn't let fame stop her from being curious, and adventurous. Glynn shared how Aretha was always willing to explore new ideas and try things outside of her comfort zone. As her final days passed, Aretha's strength remained. Glynn held her hand at her bedside and noticed how fragile she had become. Her hand was just skin and bone, yet her pulse was still strong. Even though her body was weak, her heart and spirit were still full of life. Glynn could feel that her strength didn't fade even in her last moments. Her breathing, though slow, showed her defiance. She was strong until the very end.
Her pulse was so strong and so full of life, and her breathing was, her respiratory was such a defiant.
Aretha had many important relationships in her life, and some of them helped her become the person she was. After she split from Ted, she met a man named Ken Cunningham in 1969. Ken played a big part in her life. According to her cousin and backup singer, Brenda Franklin Corbett, Ken was much better for Aretha than Ted had been. She said that Ken helped Aretha stop drinking and made her life more organized. He was serious about art, books, and music, and he loved all kinds of music. He came into Aretha's life at just the right time. Aretha needed someone who could guide her in a positive direction, and Ken did just that.
Ken Cunningham was a lover of Aretha, a father to one of her children.
Ken Cunningham became Aretha's manager, and they even lived together for a time. However, they never got married.
Kind of ushers in a new artistic period in her life where she's, in a stable relationship and able to kind of explore a new part of herself.
They did have a son named Kikolf in March 1970. His name came from the initials of his parents, Ken E. Cunningham and Aretha L. Franklin. Aretha was happy to be having a child with Ken, but she wasn't ready to get married again after her difficult breakup with her first husband. She also had a long-term relationship with Willie Wilkerson. In the 1980s, Aretha met Willie Wilkerson, a former firefighter, and they started a relationship. They were together for about 30 years, and their bond was strong. Aretha once said they were a fiery match. In 2012, they even got engaged.
Aretha Franklin is engaged to longtime friend Willie Wilkerson. Franklin told the Associated Press in a statement Monday that the pair was considering a summer wedding, perhaps on Miami Beach.
But they decided to call it off shortly after. Aretha explained that they were moving too fast and had not thought things through carefully. She said there would be no wedding at that time. Willie Wilkerson was very important to Aretha, and he passed away in 2020 from COVID-19. At the time of his death, his daughter shared that Aretha had been a huge part of his life. They loved each other deeply and were like best friends. Aretha would call him often, and they always referred to each other with sweet names. There was nothing Willie wouldn't do for Aretha, and their relationship was special to both of them. And there was also the relationship and engagement to a Temptations star. Aretha was engaged to Dennis Edwards. A member of the legendary group, The Temptations. At the time, both of their careers were at their peak, and nobody knew they were even a couple. Somehow, they kept it quiet back then, which is hard to believe today. But later on, both Aretha and Dennis spoke about their past love for each other, even after their relationship ended. Although he became famous as a member of The Temptations, and later had his own successful solo career, he was best known for his hit song, Don't Look Any Further, which came out in the 1980s, featuring Seda Garrett. Edwards was also the father of a daughter with another very famous soul singer. But despite his success, Dennis admitted years later that he regretted not marrying Aretha. Aretha shared that Dennis missed his chance to be her husband. In an interview, she explained that Dennis was about 15 years too late. She said that by the time he understood how valuable she was, it was already too late. Aretha had been hurt by Dennis a few times, and she wasn't interested in him anymore. She had moved on, and he was left to regret his missed opportunity. He confessed, "It was all in my court, and I think I'm the one that was so scared of marrying this superstar." It seemed that Dennis was unsure of how to handle being with someone as famous and successful as Aretha. He later realized that he had made a mistake. It was clear that Aretha had learned her lesson about love. She knew that sometimes the men she loved couldn't love her the way she deserved. After their breakup, both Aretha and Dennis moved on to other relationships. Aretha stayed with her longtime partner, William Wilkerson, until her death. Meanwhile, Dennis married his wife, Brenda, and they stayed together until he passed away. But Dennis wasn't the only famous man in Aretha's life. She had a big crush on Sam Cooke, another famous soul singer.
You like to see most of all?
Sam Cooke. Anytime, Sam.
I know you.
There were rumors that they had a romantic relationship, but this was never confirmed. Sam's brother, L.C. Cooke, who was also a singer, once talked about the time when Aretha was starting her career. He said that their father, the Reverend C.L. Franklin, didn't want Aretha to date Sam Cooke. Instead, he thought she should date L.C. because he believed L.C. was more settled and stable. L.C. shared a story from when Aretha went on her first tour with Sam and him. Aretha called L.C. and asked him if he could drive her father's new car so that she could use it on the tour. At first, Sam didn't like the idea. He didn't want L.C. to be driving her, saying that he was trying to help L.C. become a star, not just a chauffeur. But after some convincing, Sam agreed, and L.C. went to get the car. L.C. thought nothing of it at first, but later realized that Reverend Franklin had a different plan in mind. He wanted L.C. to date Aretha because he didn't trust Sam to treat her right. L.C. later learned the truth about his father's intentions. He said, "Reverend Franklin wanted me to get with Aretha. He figured Sam would break her heart." This was a surprising revelation. L.C. was told by Aretha's road manager in 1970 that Aretha had a difficult time picking the right man for her. The road manager said, "Aretha can do a lot of things, but she do not know how to pick a man." It seemed that Aretha's father was trying to protect her from getting hurt by the wrong man, and he thought L.C. would be a better choice for her. Aretha had a difficult personal life. She also had issues with alcohol. These problems in her personal life affected her music. She went through tough times, which made it hard for her to focus fully on her performances. Sometimes she struggled to show her best when she was on stage because of the personal pain she was going through. Her emotional and physical struggles shaped her music, and this made her songs feel real and raw, as if they were coming from her heart. But at the same time, these problems made it harder for her to keep her career moving smoothly. Aretha Franklin was very private about her personal life. She didn't want people to know much about her relationships. She kept her personal life away from the public eye, which made many people curious. Some people even started making up stories about her, guessing things that may or may not have been true. Since Aretha didn't talk much about her personal life, people were left to wonder about it, which made her seem like a mystery to many. This mystery helped her keep a strong image, but it also led to rumors and speculation. Some of the rumors included stories about her being involved with married men. These rumors continued because Aretha never confirmed or denied them. She was quiet about her relationships, which made her seem even more private and sometimes secretive to the public. In the end, Aretha Franklin's private life played a big role in her career. Her relationships, both good and bad, affected her music and how people saw her. While many stories about her love life are still not proven, it is clear that her personal struggles shaped who she was as an artist. Aretha Franklin's music was often a reflection of her life, and the hardships she faced made her voice even more powerful. Despite the challenges she faced in her personal life, she created a legacy that people still admire today.